Now, the kidnapping of the four Moti brothers in Limpopo in October last year shocked the country. Zidan, Zayyad, Alaan, and Zia Moti, aged between 6 and 15, were kidnapped by gunmen on their way to school. Shortly after they were reunited with their family, police said investigations into that kidnapping will continue. For more on this now, we're joined by eNCA's Barry Bateman, who's here in studio to talk through some of the details or the developments that have since come out of this particular investigation. Quite a spanner in the works of being thrown into it now that the family has moved to Dubai.
Well, not just that. I mean, the first aspect which appears to have preceded this move is that on the day that the children were released, if you recall, it was breaking news. We got it. They walked to a family in a rural area at about 8:30 at night, from where they called the police and so on. The children were taken to a medical facility to be checked out, their health and so on, as you would in a case like this here. What we understand now, and confirmed by the police, is that at that stage, the family, the father, secured an interdict against the police to prohibit the investigators from interviewing the four children or any other member of the Moti family. That in itself put a stop to the investigation. Now, what we know is that this was an ex parte application, meaning that the police did not have an opportunity at that stage to make representations or oppose the application. There will be a return date for that when they'll have the opportunity. But as you pointed out, the family has now left the country. We don't quite have clarity on whether this is for good. I've gone to the family and I've asked them various questions. They're just simply not speaking.
No, absolutely, Barry. And it's going to be very difficult for investigators to maneuver within this case now, given the developments that you've just given. In your engagement with investigators, what is their way forward? How do they proceed, if they will at all?
They are hamstrung. Speaking to the children was, and these are the complainants, the victims in this matter, was going to be key to getting little bits of information that might lead them ultimately to the perpetrators. And that's the concern here, that there are people out there who have, secured a significant amount of money. It was News 24 that reported 50 million rand ransom that was paid to secure the release. There is, of course, the chance, because now it shows that crime pays, that they might do this again to another significantly wealthy family. So the way forward, what I understand is now we spoke to Minister Becky Cele. He said the investigation is not over. So with whatever information that they've managed to gather at this stage, they will continue. I just want to point out as well is that in October, when we learnt that these children had been kidnapped, the police threw significant resources at this investigation. It wasn't just in Limpopo, but national resources were thrown. We're looking at crime intelligence, the Hawks and so on. Various experts were put together to try and help this family. At some stage, the family locked the police out. They just no longer dealt with them. They refused to cooperate. It was in that period where the police played no role that they managed to secure the release of these children. And subsequently, we know that they've got this interdict and left the country. So the police being given the cold shoulder quite early on, not just after the recovery.
No, absolutely, Barry. And you bring up something very important in terms of crime actually paying. And I do understand that we've got Yusuf Abramjee on the line to talk us through some of the details of these developments. Yusuf, many thanks for your time this morning. I think one of the things we've just been discussing with Barry Bateman is the fact that the police being unable to do their job, particularly when it comes to kidnappings in South Africa, is going to prove detrimental in terms of curbing the scourge of the kidnappings.
Good morning. Indeed, Barry is absolutely correct. I think this creates the perception that crime pays. We know that the police put in massive resources. I'm told it runs into millions of rands. When the children were kidnapped in October, we know that the police were 24/7 on this case, and eventually the family locked them out. It's very unfortunate, in my view, that the police are now out of this investigation. But that does not stop the police from continuing their investigations. I've said from the very beginning, and I think Barry backed me up when we said this, the gang involved in the Moti abduction most certainly is a dangerous gang. We know they came with heavy firepower. They came with 2 or 3 vehicles. They took the children. They were brazen. And I have always said on record on eNCA that I wouldn't be surprised that this gang is involved in, or was involved in, a number of other kidnappings And I think the mere fact that the family or the children do not want to cooperate with the police is now going to open the way for this gang to continue to run terror and perhaps target other families. Also, the mere fact that there is speculation that corrupt police officials or law enforcement officials may be aiding and abetting this particular syndicate has not been excluded, but that does not give the family the right to say simply, we are not going to cooperate with the police. Now, we know, as Barry reported, that the family is now in the UAE, in Dubai. I know that they have some family members who are now residing in Dubai. And I think within a matter of days, we'll be able to ascertain whether they are coming back. But I hope the police still continue the investigation. And I will not be surprised that if the father and the mother refuse that the children be interviewed, that the police will possibly consider charges of defeating the ends of justice. But it will be interesting to see how the police will take this matter forward.
Now, Yusuf, what I understand from the people I've spoken to, now I haven't had sight, unfortunately, of the court papers just yet, but I understand that the reason cited by the family for obtaining this interdict is because they were concerned that the boys were traumatized and that further interaction with the police detectives would compound that trauma. Now, that certainly is a reasonable I suppose, reason to provide. Of course, it can't be open-ended. But we've just recently had the specialized anti-kidnapping task team set up within crime intelligence. Now, shouldn't that be able to inspire more confidence in the SAPS now, considering these recent, I suppose, successes that this unit has had?
Most certainly, Barry. Let's not forget, we had an 11-year-old girl taken in Mayfair. She was returned just a few days ago. 3 arrests have been made. That particular case, the family, the little girl is cooperating with police. It is very traumatic. The psychological effects, aside from the physical effects of the victim's trauma, continues for many, many months, if not years. But that's not the reason why they should not be cooperating with police. For the police to have a successful arrest and conviction, they need the victims to cooperate. The police offered a lot of services to the family, I'm told. The Department of Social Services in Limpopo offered their services. They were all refused. Well, I suppose, you know, when you're looking for your children, the police are good enough. But when you want to arrest the suspects, the police are not good enough. And that is a problem. Also, it needs to be said that the children, one can fully understand the trauma, the psychological effects, which probably is going to be with them for the rest of their lives. The only worry is, if we don't cooperate with the authorities, we're going to open the door for these syndicates and for these gangs to continue to run amok. And that is a very, very big worry. For us to make sure that we arrest the suspects, they get convicted, the children must cooperate with the police. And we know in most of the kidnapping cases, the victims and their families are warned that if you are released or when you are released, if you cooperate with the police, we're coming back and we're going to do this and that to you. That should be no reason. Yes, these kidnappers use intimidating tactics. They put a lot of fear into the victims. I know in one particular case where the victim was taken and then released, they told the victim very clearly, if you're going to speak to the police, we're going to come back and kill you. So one can understand the fear, but I think really we need to put our heads together and our forces together to make sure that we break the backbone of these syndicates. And yes, the kidnapping task team, which was restructured, Barry, as you correctly mentioned a number of times, that even in your reports, has made some inroads. Major General Firoz Khan from Crime Intelligence, who's heading up that particular unit, they've arrested a number of people. They're making great strides. But we need to make sure that we continue these investigations and don't let these criminals simply walk free.
Right. Yusuf, very encouraging. We've just spoken about that kidnapping task team that's been established, which will hopefully help in the scourge that we're seeing. But worryingly, you'll remember there was a crime intelligence report that was released late last year showing that kidnapping spiked by about 60%. And the worrying factor, which I'd like you to zone in on here, Yusuf, is the fact that it's alleged in that report that some members of SAPS and private security agencies are usually involved in some of these kidnappings. Surely that makes the job of law enforcement officials that much more difficult.
Indeed. I'm so happy you raised it. I've said for a number of years that my biggest worry is, especially within the kidnapping task team before it was restructured, that there are corrupt law enforcement officials inside and outside of this particular unit that are involved. There's no secret that some of the cops, some road cops have been arrested. We saw in the kidnapping of a Molana in Benoni, an EMPD officer was arrested for that particular kidnapping. We know that some of these corrupt cops very often aid and abet these syndicates. We know that a colonel from the kidnapping task team is on trial for corruption. He allegedly demanded a sum of money from the victim of a family while the negotiations with the family was continuing. We know that there are rogue private security people that are not even registered with SIRA, that are going out and taking money from some of these families. Some of them are even on a retainer. That needs to be stopped. I think the quicker the police, corrupt cops and those that are involved are cleaned up, the better it will be. But I think the good news is we are seeing some progress being made. We're seeing a number of these criminals arrested. Even in the 11-year-old girls kidnapping the Mayfair girl, we know that there have been some reports that a ransom of 2.5 million rand was paid 2 or 3 weeks before she was freed by police, by crime intelligence. Again, there I'm told that they were demanding most ransom. You talk of the crime statistics, figures for the period of 3 months showed a dramatic increase. While most of the kidnappings are related to hijackings, where they take you and they hold you hostage and they empty your bank account, we know that a large chunk of them are for ransom. In all the high-profile ones, including the Moti one, we are talking of organized crime syndicates, their motive, ransom. They want money, money, and more money, and they seem to be running and smiling all the way to the bank. So the quicker we break their backbone, the better it will be.
No, absolutely, Barry Bateman. You've just heard those insights provided by Yusuf. You were nodding quite in agreement, and just your engagement with the people that are part of this new task team and really the work that's ahead. Do you find that they are confident in the resources that they've been given, the leadership that was mentioned by Yusuf Abramjee, that they will be able to meet this issue head to head?
I absolutely do believe that. There has been a turning point, and I think the Moti boys being kidnapped was that turning point. Before that, I think there were 5 people within crime intelligence who were assigned to deal with kidnappings of this nature, which is absurd given the increase in the types of crimes we've seen over the last decade. You just look at the crime stats. Now, while Yusuf just touched on there, the vast majority relate to robbery, hijacking and the like, and a very small amount of them actually relate to this kidnapping for ransom. But these are serious cases nonetheless that need the significant resources given how this crime has escalated over the time period. Now, as Yusuf pointed out, just recently we had the colonel arrested who was part of this kidnapping task team. That also what prompted this restructuring. We've had the senior General Feroz Khan who's been appointed to lead up this unit, and there's also a drive to recruit. So the instruction has gone out to all the provinces, generals, that to look from within for people who would want to be part of this particular task team to be able to contribute. So you're looking for specific expertise that might be able to assist the police in this specific crime. So at least we're seeing in the in the background that there are efforts underway, that finally there is some acknowledgement of the seriousness of this particular crime. There are resources being put towards it, and they want to grow the capacity within crime intelligence, within the SAPS, to be able to bring a stop to it. And I think what's important to note as well, we have seen successes in the last couple of weeks. I was in Heidelberg about a month ago, a Mozambican businessman who had been rescued there from a flat in a complex. I was out this week in Devlin in Soweto for the 11-year-old girl that was rescued. These successes are a direct result of this new appointment of this kidnapping task team, and I think they need the necessary support.
Yusuf, you touched on something quite important in your earlier response, this idea that the family, should it happen, could be charged with obstruction of justice. Talk us through the likelihood and how that'll assist this case in terms of it being solved.
You know, I'm actually very surprised that the family went to the court to go and get an interdict against the police. I think there could have been a better way to handle that. I don't see any harm for the children to have been interviewed by police or police psychologists so they can get an inside story. And that is why I think the modus operandi of the family I find very, very strange. I don't recall a recent kidnapping case. In fact, any kidnapping case where the family went to a court to get an order so that the police cannot interview them. And I think the Minister of Police is right. This investigation is far from over. And I think it will be interesting to see how the police are going to take this particular case forward. We do know that a number.
Looks like we've lost Yusuf Abramjee there. But Barry, while I've got you, just one more thought from you. What ways can victims of kidnappings be interviewed in the best, most delicate way, I suppose, if we could put it that way?
I mean, this is very important, and this is exactly what Yusuf touched on, that there might have been a different way that the family could have done this if they were concerned about the well-being of their children. And of course they were. It's entirely reasonable and understandable. I don't think any parent would disagree with that. But when the police are engaged or dealing with minors, I mean, there are special units within the SAPS. There are NGOs, for example, the Teddy Bear Clinic. There are social workers who specialize in dealing with children in a way that you're able to obtain statements from, meaningful statements from them that can be used in a criminal matter, such as obtaining further evidence and, ultimately being able to present those statements in court. And they need to deal with them either through intermediaries, there's social workers, there are various people who are able to do this. This is their job. So that would have been the way, if there was concern from the parents, to be able to go through this, and there certainly are mechanisms to ensure that the investigation can continue and ultimately land up in a court of law.
Yeah, absolutely. Barry Bateman, following that story, the developments around the Moti brothers and the kidnapping there. Thank you very much for your time. That's Barry Bateman, senior reporter here at eNCA.